It's opinionated, there's a brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Very shortly, we will be going through Friday morning's headlines and deeper into the stories. But first, here's Polly Middlehurst with the news.
And the top story tonight, the first British national named as Scottsibley and understood to be a British military veteran has been killed in Ukraine. The Foreign Office saying it's urgently seeking further information on a second British national who's missing. They've confirmed families are currently being supported. More on that when we get it. And the UN Secretary-General says civilians in the south port city of Mariupol in Ukraine need an escape route out of what he's calling an apocalypse. Antonio Guterres has met the Ukrainian president for talks today, as well as visiting the town of Bucha. And he says intense discussions are still underway to evacuate fighters and civilians from the southeastern city.
But the men and women of the United Nations are working every day for the people of Ukraine, side by side with so many brave Ukrainian organizations. They are engaged in an enormously complicated mission under difficult conditions. This is one of the fastest scale-up operations we have ever undertaken, and we are very much aware that not everything is perfect.
The most important thing is to see what the UN, can do to unblock Azovstal to save people's lives. We spent a lot of time discussing this issue, and I trust and believe that the Secretary-General and we all will be able to have a successful result to have people return alive.
Meanwhile, in the west of the country, emergency services are extinguishing fires after two blasts hit Ukraine's capital. Ukrainian officials say Russia has fired 2 missiles in Kyiv, with one of them striking the lower floors of a residential building. They say at least 3 people have been taken to hospital. News at home, and the Conservative MP Jamie Wallace has been charged with failing to stop after a car crash in November last year. South Wales police say he's also been charged with failing to report a collision, driving without due care and attention, and leaving a vehicle in a dangerous position on the highway. Wallace recently came out as trans and revealed in a personal statement he'd been raped and blackmailed. The MP is due to appear before Cardiff Magistrates Court next month. The Prime Minister has called the behaviour of an MP allegedly caught watching pornography on his mobile phone in the House of Commons unacceptable in any workplace. It follows the Labour leader calling for the Conservative Party to take action now against the MP. Boris Johnson says the case would need to go through the appropriate complaints procedure, just as his chief whip launched an investigation. And Her Majesty the Queen has hosted a face-to-face meeting with the Swiss president. Posing with Mr Ignacio Cassis and his wife Paula, Her Majesty was photographed without her walking stick. The monarch returned to Windsor Castle this week after spending last week at her Sandringham estate. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you with GB News. And now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight we have Eric McElroy and Andrew Doyle. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
How are you? Once again, some kind of confusion over the dress code.
There really is, isn't there? I'm quite envious of this sort of paisley patterned.
Brave with colour, as my wife would say.
I've seen what Leo Kurz wears on the show, and I'm trying to up my game.
And at least you're not there's no racial epithets or anything visible.
No, not visible.
There is that at least.
Not visible.
Oh, you've got a few woven into the paisley
Tucked
there.
Tucked in.
If we put a disco light on you, that brings out the secret message, like the onion skin. How are you, Andrew?
I'm very good, but I'm not feeling as funky as that. That is a funky look, you know.
Well, no, but you're a serious player, aren't you?
Yeah.
That's
Bland, I think, is the word. Bland.
So let's see what the newspapers have got lined up for us. Tomorrow morning, this is Friday morning's newspapers. You might be watching this on Friday morning, of course. We start with the Daily Telegraph. And they have Britain to send 8,000 troops to Eastern Europe. And there is a photograph on the front page there of Scottsibley, 36, who is the first British serviceman to be killed by a Russian bombardment yesterday. Very sad news. We also have Mandarin defies ministers over working from home. The Independent have a happier image on their front page. That's Ben Stokes, who 5 years after a street fight threatened his career, was yesterday named as the England Test captain. Meanwhile, the Tories are failing to act on MP who watched porn. Didn't just watch it, watched it on his phone in the House of Commons with female MPs next to him, I believe. The Guardian has got Biden defies Putin's threat by doubling aid for Ukraine. An extraordinary photograph there of what I believe is a young Ukrainian lad in a bombed-out truck cabin. And a couple of little sidebars there. The PM urged to act swiftly over porn watcher MP. Pollution over who limit in almost every UK home. The Financial Times is also leading with the Biden aid story. Biden asked Congress for $33 billion in extra aid to support Ukraine. They also have a story not covered elsewhere. China in worst shape in 30 years, says big Hong Kong private equity investor. That's the kind of slightly dull but important story that the FT will cover and that might well have more ramifications for world financial health than is easily anticipated. A step nearer justice for my James on the Daily Mirror. This is the murder of James Bulger, which I expect some of our younger viewers will not even remember. 1993, a lot of time has passed, but it is likely now that there may be a public inquiry nearly 30 years on into the early release of his killers. And the Daily Express, barely able to conceal their delight, trumpeting the death of BBC licence fee in funding shake-up. Picture of the Queen on the front page there, looking delighted at the news as well, but I think it's a separate story entirely. The Metro has Brit killed in Ukraine. Again, Scottsibley there, his sad death, the first known UK casualty. And a story about some TV stars who are not quite as nice as the characters they play. Daily Star, finally, shame of Britain, disorder, toxic booze problem, blamed for sleazy MPs. One Tory watched porn, another is charged over a car crash, and a top Labour MP is labelled a bully. Well, we will be covering all of those stories. Those are the headlines. So we'll kick off with some sad news about a British fighter in Ukraine. Andrew?
Yes, this is Scottsibley, who, as you saw, appears on a number of the front covers tomorrow. This is very sad. This is a British soldier. Had served in Afghanistan, went out to fight in Ukraine.
Not as part of the British Army. I mean, I suppose
No.
we should emphasise that. It's obviously, this is not we have not crossed that line.
No, absolutely. In fact, the Foreign Office has said explicitly they don't want people to go out and fight.
Yeah.
Although there has been some confusion because Liz Truss said she unequivocally supported those who did. So that's a sort of separate issue. In regard to Scottsibley, 36 years old, a father. He's the first confirmed British individual who's been killed in this conflict. Of course, there's been lots of tributes coming in now, by all accounts.
Do we have any idea how many British independent individuals have gone over them?
Interestingly, the Russians have published a list of 100 what they call British mercenaries who are out there.
Well, I guess that is fair enough. That's probably the correct term. It just carries a bit of a taint, but...
It implies you're being paid to do it, and I don't think that is
soldiers
the
of fortune, then, you might
Yeah, I imagine there are a fair few, and Scottsibley is the first one who is being killed. But yeah, I mean, it's
very, very sad.
It's sad.
Anything to add to that, Eric?
No, I mean, it's awful. I mean, for the Russians to talk about mercenaries when they were bragging at the beginning that they were going to bring in a bunch of Syrian soldiers is a bit rich, of course.
Well, it is funny how, I say, is it funny? It is curious how there is a taint that attaches to mercenaries. I think there are different cultures, there are different empires which have been built entirely with mercenary forces, and they are often regarded as being superior to conscripted soldiers. I mean, there is an argument that they're a far more moral way in which to support your territorial ambitions, if that's what you want to do, to hire men who understand the risks and are being amply rewarded for taking those risks, rather than to get a bunch of 19-year-olds and lure them into the idea that this, I mean, God, none of it's very pretty, is it, at the end of the day? But Scottsibley obviously knew what he was doing. He's of course, and he's to be honoured.
Well, it goes. I mean, it goes some way. It's a testament to the strength of feeling behind this that people are going. I mean, there were people who went out to fight against ISIS, of course, as well. You know, so it's clearly this was a passion to him. Yeah. And
Well, we salute you, Mr. Sibley, and I'm sorry to hear of your end. Eric, first story from Westminster this evening. Quite a few we have racked up of MPs behaving badly.
So this is one way to find out who some MPs are, because I'd never heard of Liam Byrne before. A Labour MP, this is a story from The Times, suspended for the Commons for bullying his staff, a staff member of his. He's a Labour cabinet minister, so, I think that Labour saw how well the Tories were doing with controversy and so decided to step in.
But this was a while ago, wasn't it? He was doing this. Was he doing this during his time when he was in office, or is it more recent?
Well, he was doing it to somebody in his constituency office. So, so it was a while ago, because 2019 is when the person was working for him. So a few years ago.
Because his most famous, sorry to interrupt you, his most famous, the only thing he was famous for was leaving a rather sarcastic note when the Tories took over from Gordon Brown. He was the one who left the note in the Treasury office.
Yes, that's why I'm surprised you haven't heard of him.
Yes.
I'd forgotten about that.
He was the Chief Secretary of the Treasury.
No money left. There's no money left.
Yeah.
There is no money. And I always quite liked him for that, to be honest. But
now he's got another reason for us to remember who he is, which is good.
It's like Bruce Forsyth said, you've got to keep it, every so often you have to kind of make your name again.
That has been over 10 years now, I suppose.
Yeah.
That was 10 years.
What was the bullying amounted to? Was he like lunch money? What was
he ostracized his member of staff named David Barker. He denied David access to his IT account, and he broke off contact with him, which, I mean, it is bullying. That's not good.
It's not nice.
It sounds like stuff that would happen with my kids. Like, you can't play with the IT account. I'm not talking to you, and don't touch my toys. What I liked was that Liam has been told to write a letter of apology, which made me think of Bart Simpson in the opening credits, just right.
Yes.
I will not ostracize my members of staff.
Well, I don't know how sorry he's. I mean, he was doing it. This was a sustained thing.
Yeah.
There were all sorts of things like him wiping access to his computer.
Really?
Changing, making his passwords void. This kind of strange behaviour.
I wouldn't even do that to my wife.
No, it's
I don't have to. She deletes her own password.
But also, this is the equivalent of ghosting.
Yeah,
I mean, he's basically not replying to messages, emails, or anything like that. And his excuse was, "Well, I wasn't his line manager." And it is a weird, a sort of nasty passive-aggressive type of bullying when you just ignore someone. In a sense, it's worse, I think, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, it can certainly, it messes with your mind, doesn't it? Which can be very unsettling. Yeah, you're not quite sure that anything is going on. Am I imagining it? That's kind of part of it. Yeah.
But being, suspended for 2 days from the House of Commons.
Just 2 days.
I mean, it's a bit of a farce anyway.
Yeah, but this is his main punishment, is being spoken of in these terms on GBNews, isn't
exactly.
That is definitely...
You'll be to get up from that now.
Very disappointing.
Andrew, part 2, MPs behaving badly. This one has picked the excuse du jour to explain his trans.
Yes.
Say his Trav just stopped on the word trans, which is not appropriate.
This is Jamie Wallace, and of course Jamie Wallace has been in the press a great deal recently because he came out as trans, although said he wanted to use male pronouns still and retain all the accoutrements of maleness, etc. But, there's been all sorts of issues surrounding Jamie Wallace. So this was the car crash that he was involved with. Yeah. And now he's been charged for it.
And the car crash, it wasn't that the crash itself was criminal, but he left the scene of the accident.
He left the scene,
and just to be clear, the implication is that had he remained there, he may have been subjected to...
That's right. I mean, you've got to... We all know you have to report these things, and he failed to report it. He's now been charged as a result of that. One of the reasons that he gave, though, was that he claims that he was raped, and that obviously this has, as it would, caused all sorts of psychological problems. He was blackmailed. all sorts of horrible things like this. So
he said he'd been using a sort of dating site or something, hadn't he? And I think he'd been trying to sort of explore his sexuality, come to terms with it, and he'd had some hookups, and some of them had gone wrong, and this was one of the ones that had gone wrong.
Yes.
All of which sounds horrific, but I don't know, maybe even just saying "but" after the back. I mean, it really is horrific. But I think his constituents have the right to expect that if somebody is spiralling out of control like that in their private life and no longer able to obey the law in some fairly straightforward matters.
Oh, I mean, of course, you
can't carry on, can you?
You can't be an elected representative and you break the law in this way.
Yeah.
But everyone, obviously, everyone has complete and utter sympathy for someone who's in that position, where they're being blackmailed, where they're being raped, etc. But no, of course, I mean, he has to be held accountable for all of this. And it just seems that it is one thing after another with James.
And is there, I mean, am I out of order saying this? Is there a little bit of suspicion that when you reach for some of these things in order to, exculpate yourself, you shift the centre of focus of attention? Not, I mean, claim of rape, not that, but to say, I'm trans, I had issues when I was young. My doctor explained to me that I seem to be having some sort of gender dysphoria. I now realise that I'm trans. But no male pronouns, no change in dress, no change in habits. Well, it all just smacks a little bit of somebody who's trying to throw up squid ink, doesn't it?
Well, it does distract
I mean?
from the, a couple of years ago when he was running, he was, depicted as his father with a married man with children, and, but no one's talking about infidelity or anything like that, the kind of scandal that you would, because everyone's talking about how brave he is for coming out and being the first openly transgender member of parliament. So, look, I can't read his mind. I don't know whether there is an element of a distracting technique there, or whether all of this is sincere and coincidental. I don't know. But
well, you give the man the benefit of the doubt, but I certainly think his constituents have the right to express a degree of dissatisfaction. What do you think, Eric?
Well, I mean, overall, with all these scandals happening, I mean, it does feel like there's a top trumps going on between the MPs at the moment. That you've got the porn watching going on, the bullying going on over here. I mean, are they daring each other to do these things? Like, go steal some candy from a baby. What's the next level?
They're being exposed as a shoddy third-rate cohort, aren't they?
Yeah. Jamie Wallace was also implicated in a sugar daddy website, dodgy website. A couple years ago.
I wasn't meaning that when I mentioned candy.
No, that's just coincidence. Yeah. But there seems to be quite a lot going on.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot going on in that particular example. Eric, next story is about the Electoral Commission, and this is in The Independent, so no doubt the government have done something dastardly and unscrupulous.
Well, I mean, maybe this is all part of the plan. The cynical part of me would say that, you've got these little scandals about bullying, and not little, but a car accident and so on. But here, the Electoral Commission is concerned after the Tories pushed through a vote in the House of Lords to seize control of some of the mechanisms of our elections. The vote came through in the House of Lords on Wednesday night after it had been knocked back on Monday. I mean, the headline should be unelected House of Lords failed to protect democracy.
The funny thing about the House of Lords, I mean, there's all sorts of funny things about the House of Lords, and I said you wouldn't certainly reverse engineer it, but its natural bias is actually anti the government. It's because
they've got a majority opposition.
Majority opposition, and that's sort of permanent as well. So it's the sort of traditional view of the House of Lords, I suppose, essentially as being a bunch of old aristocratic duffers, is actually it's not that. They do tend to be very much more sceptical. Certainly of any kind of radical legislation. They are generally speaking like a temperate. They are like the ocean surrounding the island and achieving a deal. It's unusual that something slips through in this. There would normally have been a majority in the House of Lords that would have defied it.
They did a bit of a fast one because it got knocked back on Monday and they brought it in Wednesday night without much notice. And so it was the Conservative Lords that were there, and the ones who would have voted against it weren't, because they apparently didn't get warned that this was happening. And this is, I mean, a bill, if you're concerned about democracy, this is the government seizing control of an independent commission. This is bringing in the voter ID things, which are the definition of voter suppression. There is no voter ID problem, because this is a big thing in the US as well.
You think that is the definition of suppression, is being required to show who you are in order to vote?
The claims of fraud that are being prevented by the lack of voter ID are just not proven. There is just no wide-scale voter fraud in the UK.
Do you think it would suppress it, though? Do you think people who can't find ID should be allowed to just vote anyway?
The studies have shown that it disproportionately affects people from lower incomes and from minority communities, and maybe who are less
the more I hear about it, the more I like it. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? That it becomes politicised because the demographics more likely to vote for the left are less likely to secure voter ID. But I also find it very patronising, the idea that minority groups can't get hold of an ID. You know, they know full well how to get hold of an ID.
It's not hard in this country as well. I think in America it's a slightly different calculation.
Probably.
Some of the IDs were a little bit harder to get hold of. But
it's one thing this article doesn't really make clear is why the Conservative Party are pushing this through, and they want this this involvement with the Electoral Commission.
But they want control. I mean,
that would be the conspiratorial kind of.
Well, I mean, they're taking control through doing this legislation.
Yeah.
I think they might be forgetting that eventually, I mean, hopefully they will, you know, they would, unless they seize total control, be out of power, and then they're essentially giving something to a future Labour government.
it is interesting. There are some people. I don't dive that deeply into it. But there are a lot of people who feel that under the Blair administration, this is an example of a commission that was set up under the Blair administration, I think 2001, something like that. There were an awful lot of such commissions and quangos and other non-governmental organisations and quasi, and they were you know, staffed overwhelmingly by sort of Blairite or even further left individuals, and one by one, a lot of people who voted for Johnson would like to see them either dissolved or ratcheted down a couple of notches or reined in, because there is a sense that a huge amount of our democracy has been sort of farmed out to these people who are not actually accountable. So in a funny way, the exact opposite would be their view, that actually this makes the Electoral Commission answerable to the electorate.
Well, they've said that explicitly. It's about accountability, and I would agree when it talks about these quangos that they have a bias. They have, you know, they're not helpful.
No, that's right. And then there are people like the chap in The Independent who talk about them as if they are something that have been there since time immemorial, and that the Johnson government are trying to tear down our great institutions, and they are all sort of, you know, the smell of new carpet is still evident as soon as you enter the premises. OK. So that's that. And Jacob Rees-Mogg admits to self-harming. Self-harming limitations on food imports.
Yes, so he's now, Jacob Rees-Mogg, as you know, is the Brexit Opportunities Minister, is saying that he's going to scrap. You find that a funny title?
It's an ironic title. Sorry, I didn't mean to...
He's decided to scrap the the checks on EU food imports, OK? And,
which is a unilateral sort of checks. It doesn't mean that the EU are not going to check our food on the way out. Is that?
No. This is something this was always going to happen.
Yeah.
And he's just pushing it back, and the reason he's pushing it back is because of the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
Also, the rising gas and energy prices as a result of the invasion of Ukraine. And apparently, these checks that would have been implemented would have led to rising costs. Some of them quite extreme. I mean, according to this article, I'm not sure if I believe this, that small deliveries like cheese, and it says here cheese specifically, you could have up to a 71% increase in cost.
Wow.
I mean, can that be right?
Well, some things are funny, isn't it? What cost things? I mean, you know the famous thing with the bottle of wine. Like, if you until you spend at least £6 on a bottle of wine, all you're spending money on is bottle.
Yes.
Tax, transport, transit, you know.
Right.
And you have to spend at least £6 before you spend 20 pence on the wine.
OK.
There are some things before. It's a weird kind of calculations. It may well be that with, you know, cheese, that might be the...
Well, maybe. I mean, it seems like this is just a sensible thing. And like you say, it would have been an act of self-harm economically.
That's what he thinks,
Just to keep it going. And I think it's quite sensible to say, we'll postpone this.
Well, there's clearly, I mean, there are a lot of supply chain problems at the moment, aren't there? And anything we can do to loosen them. What do you think, Eric?
Well, I think we can redefine, Theresa May said Brexit means Brexit. I think now we can safely say Brexit means self-harm, as the Brexit minister himself has said. So by implementing the policies he advocated, we would have that 71% increase on cheese, which would cut
up to 71%.
Up to 71%, which means, no French cheeses, which means we're still stuck with just all of the cheddar in this country, which I still can't.
Cheddar is
so
wonderful,
much cheddar.
You're an American. You get your cheese in a can. We know how you
so
guys
good
do.
in a can.
Spray cheese.
Yeah.
People
Delicious.
people are so vulgar.
Spray it in.
It's so...
The funny thing is about when you try and make burgers for your kids, the cheapest, nastiest, most chemically synthetic cheese, that's the key to making them enjoy it. If you put a slice of cheddar on a burger, they won't touch it. But as long as it's sort of orange and dripping and bubbling, it's weird.
You're making me hungry, Simon.
You can use almost any meat you want. It's weird, but they have to have the right kind of bun and they have to have the right kind of spray on cheese.
Yes.
It drives me insane.
Horrible.
We've reached the end of part one, ladies and gentlemen, with that little anti-cheese scream. Coming up, we have passports, crime and the metaverse. In the meantime, we have some ads. We'll see you in a moment. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I'm joined by the Dream Team, Andrew and Eric. Eric, passport call centre chaos, and it's the French's fault on this occasion, I believe.
Everything is, isn't it? They're trying to charge us too much for our cheese.
They will not let us pass without let and hindrance.
Yep. So this is in the Telegraph, but it's the company behind the passport call centre, which is apparently causing chaos and delays. They've been reprimanded by the Home Office, but apparently they're understaffed, and there's a surge in people trying to get passports for the summer. But it is a French company that is running our
what are they called?
Teleperformance.
Teleperformance. Doesn't sound French at all.
Can you imagine calling up for your British passport and you're getting the "Hello, monsieur," for you, the British passport?
You would like the new silly little blue passport, would you?
We will get back to you. Apparently, Boris Johnson's on it, so don't worry. He even swore a bit, privatized the out of it if they don't get on board with it.
Did he say that? Did he swear a bit?
He swore a bit.
Do you remember when they were first talking about the new blue passports and everyone was mocking the idea that Brexit had been purely in that, and then it was discovered that those passports were going to be made. I think it was in France. It was certainly in Europe, wasn't it? Or they were being distributed. The French just constantly have the opportunity to screw it up, don't they? This process. It does feel like we're just allowing them.
Yeah. I mean, it is quite an extreme. I know because Martin, one of the producers of Headliners, he's currently waiting for his passport. It could be up to 10 weeks. He's going on holiday in 3, so we shall see what happens.
My wife ordered the kids new passports because they reached that age where they need them every so often, and she got them and the kids signed them, and she's lost them.
Oh, no.
Right.
Yeah. She's just lost them in the house, and now absolute panic a couple of nights ago. Now she was literally waiting at midnight last night, every night at midnight.
Yeah.
New appointments are made for the fast-track ones. You get an appointment. It's now the 19th of May was when she got the appointment. She had to be on the website at midnight, like 15 appointments come up.
It's obviously a bad system, isn't it? I mean, and if you want the fast-track, it's very, very expensive.
Of course, I say midnight. In France, that's probably 11 p.m, isn't it? Probably reasonable time.
That's why. My favourite part of the story, though, was that the company did not provide comment because apparently the reporter was still on hold waiting to reach them.
I wonder what they listen to in France. It weren't probably Frère Jacques or something. Andrew, number of children in custody is set to double by 2024. I assume not in a good way.
No, so the National Audit Office has made a projection about the number of children that will be in custody. And they're saying, they say here that the average number of children in custody fell by 73% in the decade leading up to 2021.
And just to be clear here, when we say in custody, we're talking about having committed some sort of crime.
Exactly. So juvenile, youth offending institutions. And the forecasts now, according to the National Audit Office, is that it will double. So from that figure from 2021, which actually at that point was 343, by the time we get to 2024, that's going to be 700. So that's
still not that many.
Well, I mean, it's not great. But the thing is, this is a projection. But as this article says, that the reason for this is this rapid rise, or relatively rapid rise, is a result of increased police recruitment, moves to tackle the court backlog caused by the pandemic.
Right, so it's for good reasons then.
There are reasons, and the police crime and sentencing bill, which has, in other words, we have a tougher system.
Yeah.
Now, but what's interesting here is then you've got people sort of talking about. I mean, Andrew Nielsen, who's the director of campaigns at the Howard League for Penal Reform, and he's saying that these recent policy decisions risk sweeping more boys and girls into our failing criminal justice system. But they're not just picking children at random and locking them up. This is a failure of socialisation, surely.
Sweeping them into the justice system.
Right.
It's very strange framing, isn't it?
It seems like an odd way to put the blame on the criminal justice system for getting too strict, rather than saying, why are kids committing crimes, and maybe we need to look into how we prevent that.
But is 700 in a population of 50 million, is that a lot? I don't know.
That's a good question.
That doesn't feel like that. I mean, I know doubling sounds like a bad thing, but if you start from a low base and it's just because the police are detecting more of them, I don't know.
I think long-term is the solution, locking kids up or finding other ways to get kids socialised in a way that they're not committing crimes. Also, of course, it's disproportionately minority students that are children that are getting swept up in this. When it's half the kids are from minority families, and that's when only.
What do you mean minority? Like ethnic minority?
Ethnic minority families, yeah. Where only 22% of the UK is ethnic minority, and 50% of these kids getting swept up in this.
And you're using the swept up term, so you regard them as the victims.
Well, I think that we have to look at other solutions beyond policing.
The ethnic minority children are naughtier?
I don't think that's the case.
You don't think that's the case? Okay.
Well, no, but it's very simplistic to just pin it down to institutional racism that has caused this. But we know from the CRED report that there are all sorts of reasons why we get these kind of disparities, ultimately. Yeah. And there are all sorts of factors that need to be investigated. I mean, the disparity is worrying and does need to be looked at. The CRED report was saying, let's find out why it's happening.
Are you saying white kids are falling behind here? Is that what we're saying?
They should be stepping up.
Yeah.
Well, they should go out and mug. White kids need to go out and mug more people. Maybe.
I mean, I don't know, how old are these kids? I mean, are we talking about 14 to 16?
No,
late 17.
Late teens. They're talking here, specifically, actually, the figures that I quoted.
Probably quite a narrow band, I would imagine.
15 to 17.
Yeah.
So it's about little kids or anything. We're talking about...
You're basically talking about kids who are going through a bit of a hormonal storm in my life. This is always my view about it, and I know exactly what I would do about it, but you're not allowed to. You're allowed to do it with your dog now. But anyway... more crime stories now, Eric, but this is better news for criminals, this story.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is definitely under the headline of crime does pay, and it's a surprise that this many kids are going to jail at the moment because, according to the Telegraph, a record row of just 5.8% of crimes are being solved in the UK.
I can't help feeling that's a statistic we should keep quiet about, it, does it?
Yes. I'm yelling that.
What the hell is stopping
94% of crime is...
I'm genuinely shocked by that figure.
That is so low, isn't it? It's extraordinary.
Yeah. And the article covers lots of stats about the different levels of crime that are not being... less than 2% of rapes are getting convicted. I mean, that's just...
I know of a lot of people who or anecdotally, I've heard of people who, when they're robbed, they don't bother going to the police. They say, and I'm lucky it hasn't happened to me, so I haven't been in that position, but I can't believe this figure. How can it be the case that...
Would it include those people, do you think? Are they making estimates based on crimes that aren't even being reported?
No. These are about...
People have at least come to the police station.
Yes.
So it's,
we all know that burglary, like the clear-up rate for burglaries, is ridiculously low.
Yeah.
We know they don't basically try on that. But I had assumed that, like, for instance, assaults on the street would be...
Yeah.
But then it makes it all the more absurd that the police are spending so much time investigating and recording non-crime hate incidents, investigating hate speech, things that people say online. I mean, let's be honest, you don't have the time. No. You've got 94% of crimes that you're not solving, so get on with those.
Maybe those are the only cases they can close.
Yes,
because they're too easy.
That's what the 5.8% are. But I wonder whether, I mean, just to give it a creative spin, perhaps what we're missing here is the good news, which is that our society has achieved such a degree of stability that despite knowing that they've got a 94% chance of getting away with it, most people don't commit crimes.
That's,
we are socialised, we are so utterly domesticated now, you don't even need to do that,
Well, there's a lot of crime that's up, including fraud. It's not just violent crime. I mean, but most of that fraud is just being done by the Tory party, of course, in Parliament.
94% of MP criminals. Andrew, an ongoing story next that I know is very close to your heart. This is all to do with free speech and what have you.
Yeah, so this is from The Guardian. Elon Musk saying Twitter must be politically neutral. You know, obviously, since Elon Musk has bought Twitter, there's been an absolute meltdown, complete hysteria from what I would call the identitarian left, the sort of the people who call themselves left-wing, but they're not really, but they're obsessed with group identity. And they're going absolutely nuts. You've got people like Kathy Griffin saying that Musk is just doing this to promote white supremacy or whatever. You've got absolutely
people
insane.
referring to him as a child of apartheid.
Yes.
So it's not a phrase I've heard about him.
Apartheid baby. That's
and pretty unreasonable to be.
That's what Sean King said. But this is the thing. It's so infantile. It's just a demonstration of how not to behave as an adult in public discourse.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is people leave Jamila Jamil storming off Twitter and all the rest of it, which is fine, no great loss. But the thing is, all Elon Musk is now saying is, look, we need it to be politically neutral, and that will upset, as he says, the far left and the far right. That will bother all of those people. And he's pitching it at the 80% of normal people who don't get involved in these stupid culture wars, which are, you know, waged by these people on the extremes. And
it's very interesting, and I have to say, I mean, he used the word like an antibody reaction. I think he's absolutely right. It's extraordinary. There's the previous establishment of Twitter, the people who did feel that their views and they were the natural party of government within Twitter, as it were, you know, the left liberal. They are acting as though there is some kind of hostile body has entered the, you know, some.
Oh, they're going crazy. I mean, the employees at Twitter
as if they have an infestation of something. They're kind of like maddened, like a horse would be. You know what I mean? If it had fleas or something. There's an extraordinarily volatile reaction, and I think it tells us a great deal about the degree to which they have realised that they have been imposing their will on this platform, and now its ownership is switching, the potential for somebody else's will to be imposed. If they hadn't been malpracticing, I don't quite know how to express this, if they hadn't been taking unreasonable advantage, if they had not been using the natural tendency of the Twitter establishment, the Twitter government or whatever, to drift towards the left, to asymmetrically punish the right, then they wouldn't, I suspect, have quite such an extraordinary visceral fear of what comes next.
It must be that, because it's not as though Elon Musk is this far-right individual who's coming in.
Absolutely not.
And I mean, I think you're on.
He smokes weed on Joe Rogan's program, you know. He's a bit of a libertarian. Obviously, he plays fast and loose with, you know, to get tax funding and tax breaks and all the rest of it, but that's just, you know, you don't get to be the world's richest man without that kind of thing, obviously, but I've never seen him talking about locking more people up or, you know, I've never even seen him talk about race and stuff. I think the one thing that they are concerned about, they are presenting it as a threat, like the thing is going to be flooded with anti-Semitism and racial epithets and slurs. I suspect it's the trans issue, which has actually been extraordinarily protected.
They just want to be able to boot people off the site for having opinions they don't agree with. That's it.
Well, not just opinions, I think for stating biological facts. Sure. I think that's what they're afraid is coming, because I do think they have been using that particular issue, which is absurdly inflated beyond all actual importance, you know, for the vast majority of people, specifically in order to exercise a degree of kind of coercion over what you're allowed to think and say. You know, that's the Orwellian, like, you know, that's the Eastern Front in terms of that. And I think that's what they fear is coming. Eric, you look probably a bit sceptical on that front, but it has
There's
been
a lot of things to digest in what you've both said there. But I mean, ultimately, I think Elon Musk is kind of trolling all of us, the left and the right, because he is playing up and apparently angering people on the left-wing side. The right is excited about him coming in and taking over Twitter. He's going to say something soon, and he's going to offend them and make them all go off. I mean, the sale hasn't even gone through, I don't think. So it's been partially accepted, but it's not actually happened.
I think
the check is in the mail kind of thing. Like it's not quite.
Oh no, many a slip. That's true.
Yeah.
It is interesting as well, and some other people who know what they're talking about have said this. Obviously, it's not just my opinion. He is going to confront two major blockades to whatever changes he does want to make, whether he wants to just neutralise it or swing it to the right. One is the culture within the company itself. You know, you cannot just sack everyone. You can't replace everyone's mindset. It's very much like Tim Davie coming into the BBC and saying, right, enough of these left-wing, you know, woke panel games. We're going to have more. You can't just do that. You know, you just cannot.
But there are some things he can do which are very basic. Things like just publish a terms of service that are unambiguous. That say, this is why you will be banned. Have a system where if you do get banned and you ask why, they tell you why. Have transparency. Don't have this Kafka-esque thing where you won't tell people why you've kicked them off. And then it creates all of these problems. And, all of this, he's not saying anything unreasonable. He's just saying we will have free speech guidance within the law. And in other words...
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to say, because the other thing he will confront is there are different laws in different countries, and the laws have been... And we all know how we are concerned about the online hate speech bill or whatever, in this country, but also in the EU as well. There are, I mean, he's only saying, I want Twitter to be a place where you can enjoy free speech as defined within the present law, he's not saying
that's totally reasonable.
But it still will be difficult to police.
But, I mean, I think that the thing is freedom of speech does not come with freedom to be on a platform. And I think that's been the whole thing with Twitter and all of these other things as well. And conflating the two things. If somebody's putting out misinformation, putting out things that are trying to bring down the government of the country that the company is based in, that those people, I can see why if I had a company, I wouldn't want those people on my platform either.
Yeah, well, you were talking about Donald Trump trying to bring down the government.
Exactly, yeah.
You crack me up, Eric. More social media news now. This is Facebook, I believe.
That's right.
Maybe a related issue, possibly.
Well, I think possibly. It's the story of two billionaire lovers, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg here. So people shifting possibly away from Twitter, jumping onto what is called Meta now, is the corporate name for Facebook, because they were having a slow sales month the first quarter of this year. But shares rose after they had an 18.9% increase in activity on the platform. Because apparently some of those people maybe leaving Twitter have now jumped onto Facebook, thinking that this is a better billionaire who they're going to trust their lives and resources and communications to. I mean, so maybe, it's kind of like Elon Musk saying these things that he's been saying, because he's kind of known for sort of sabotaging his own stock and doing that. By coming out and saying these things as he buys Twitter, he might be pushing people onto another platform, sort of like, Russia by saying, well, I want to invade Ukraine, has pushed people into, supporting NATO more. So sort of a
interesting
pushing
comparison.
on one side and getting into the other. But the other thing I noticed in this article they put in there is that Pinterest is up as well, 10.4%. But I still don't understand what Pinterest is.
I don't know what it is.
Pinterest is great, actually. I like Pinterest. Essentially, you just look at lots of nice pictures. And if it learns that you like vintage bicycles, every so often it goes, here's some more vintage bicycles.
That sounds quite charming.
Pictures of ruined houses that have been taken back by nature and things. I mean, I have a number of things that it knows I like. It's generally conceived, I think, in people's imagination to be a thing that largely it's quite gendered. It's quite women prefer it. I think there's a lot more women on it than men, and they use it as sort of style notes for decor and stuff if they're planning what they'd like their barbecue pit area to look like.
You're really selling it.
That's why you look so
sharp.
sharp.
It's great. It's lovely. It's just like lots of tear sheets from glossy magazines, but in a much easier to consume. I like it. I do. I'm unashamed consumer of nicely taken photographs. And once it understands your genre, it's actually pretty good. I don't like Instagram, which is the one that everyone. Instagram is massive now. I've never understood Facebook. I cannot navigate through Facebook, and I don't intend to learn. I have enough of my time is sucked out by the vampire Twitter. Did you want to add anything to
Not particularly. I mean, I'm surprised that Facebook has had a bump at all, because it did feel like it was on a downward spiral. I think a big company like that changing its name is never a good sign. It implies that it is the end of days.
I think the metaverse thing is quite clever, though, that they have now positioned themselves early on that, and a bit like Elon Musk, who is now the wealthiest man in the world in what is still a technology in its infancy. Electric cars. That's where all the debate. And again, I think Facebook are probably correct in seeing that we are going to take another paradigmatic shift at some point and move further into the metaverse.
Well, I'm staying off it. I'm not going down that road.
It's kind of terrifying, but at the same time, I think the built environment around us is becoming so unbearably ugly precisely because people don't really live there anymore, So you're going to have to choose whether you want to live in the ruins of the previous civilization or move into the VR headset, exactly. That's the end of part 2. The stories are about to get weird. Sabotage, Samsung, spaceships, that's all in part 3. Meanwhile, these kind people are supporting our channel. Please buy their goods and services. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m, as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. With me tonight, Eric McElroy, Andrew Doyle. Andrew, government still struggling to work out how to fund the BBC. Any suggestions?
Well, yes. So Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, has described the licence fee as totally outdated, and obviously this is an ongoing debate, but now it seems to be the death knell. Ministers are basically saying it will go. The BBC's Royal Charter expires in 2027, which means that the government has got these next 5 years to implement some kind of alternative scheme.
Yep.
I mean, I think ultimately, she's right. In this age of streaming services and digital platforms and things, it is antediluvian, this idea that everyone pays for this service that we all share, because the truth is a lot of people just don't watch the BBC and aren't interested. And there's something very reasonable about saying, you should get the services that you pay for, and if you don't want to watch them, you shouldn't have to pay for them.
There was a thing, I think it was since we started broadcasting about 3 months ago, Adil Ray, I think it's a BBC breakfast presenter occasion and so on, he shared an advert from about 1985, hosted by John Cleese in a pub. Do you remember that one? And it was being served by, I can't remember who, it wasn't Leo McKern, was it? Okay, anyway, he was being served by a well-known actor from BBC Drama, and he was like, I don't see what you get for the licence fee. And the pub turns out to be full of people like David Attenborough and Gary Lineker and all the rest of them. And he was like, this is what you get for... And he was like, it was a total own goal, because it just made you realise how absolutely central to British culture the BBC had been in 1985, and how impossible it would be to make an advert like that now.
Yeah.
They just don't have that cast of figures who are welcomed in on a daily basis into all our lives.
I mean, same thing with the people who have been listing the great comedies that the BBC have produced, but they're all over 20 years old.
Yeah.
So I think the BBC has been failing. And go on, sorry, Eric.
Well, I mean, when I moved here 22 years ago, and I remember finding out I had to pay a TV license, I was just affronted. As an American, I can't pay that. But then I started to look at how few commercials I was having to watch. And if you watch American broadcast television, which I know not everybody does anymor, but it's a commercial every 10 minutes.
I know.
It's just crazy. And I think that the BBC is kind of one of those things that people say they're not using it, but I think that it's still part of life in different ways.
But you don't have to watch adverts on streaming services either.
No, well, but
I feel ambivalent about it, I have to say, because I agree with you. And apart from not only you could watch it and not see any adverts, that also provided a bulwark. Even on ITV, they didn't have as many adverts as they would have liked to have had, because they knew that people go, I can't stand this, too many adverts, I'm going to watch the BBC.
Yeah.
So it was a very effective, but you're right, of course, streaming services, and if you pay... I mean, I think we've got to be looking now at constantly updating and upgrading and keeping an open mind as to how content is paid for. Just a slightly different example, but if you do, again, read content on Twitter, if you want to read articles, there's a lot of articles where they go, if you want to read more than one article a month from The Atlantic, an American news organisation, you have to subscribe. Yeah. I'm like, I just want to read 2 articles. I'm not going to pay $5 a month for 2 articles. Even like newspapers, of course, the Guardian famously, allows you to read loads of them, and then the Telegraph is the paywall. We've got to try and work out some way that allows people to just pay as they go, pay what they want.
Well, they have to.
Because none of it makes sense at the moment. Everyone's kind of like in the dark, and
But I think even fans of the BBC are recognising that it's outdated. Surely it's outdated.
But the website is very popular. The radio stations are taken for... None of these things would cost as much, and you could have a subscription. I can't see how they would overcome it. But I always felt there's so many own goals. For instance, I know he did punch a producer, but honestly, Jeremy Clarkson was the absolute, prize, bull of the whole network. His Top Gear was the single biggest earner worldwide, but the left came from him relentlessly. They regarded his presence on the BBC as an affront. Ultimately, he committed, arguably, that was enough of a...
well, that's a criminal offence.
A criminal offence that
but it's
he
just
had
one
to go.
producer is what you're saying.
They had relentlessly campaigned that Top Gear could be taken off because they found it unacceptable. Their channel had this kind of right-wing laddish presenter.
That's another issue, is that the BBC at this point is so ideologically captured to the extent that it probably can't be rescued. And I know Tim Davies made overtures to try and do so, but it actually is probably too late. And everyone who works at the BBC knows this, by the way.
Yeah.
Even
they're going down laughing and fighting and, creating. It's like so many things. I'm just going to say this and then we'll move on. But there are lots of examples of this, but none more so than the BBC. They are afraid that their audience is growing old, and so they desperately try and appeal to the young, and they ignore the old. And the young aren't interested. The young continue to watch YouTube and TikTok videos, and the old are alienated and go elsewhere as well, and they sink. If they would just at least nurture, cultivate, even flatter people over 40, continue, and they would probably survive on that basis. They could probably continue to fund the news service, fund all the local radio stations, fund programmes like, Antiques Roadshow or whatever, and just stop with this endless attempt to curry favour with 18-year-olds who really don't know they exist.
Or the solution is to get young people into the Antiques Roadshow. That might be it.
Possible.
Do it that way.
Eric, Daily Mail now, and they've got it in for some young layabout by the sound of it.
Oh, yes. So Daily Mail, this is a classic Daily Mail article. So basically, this is covering all of the protests that happened on the M25 with people taking over a couple of petrol stations. And they focused on the people that are doing the protest in this article, specifically Lewis McNenny, I'm not sure, who had previously spent a month and a half in prison for blocking the motorway last year, but this time was vandalizing petrol pumps and using a mallet and an aerosol can, attacking the petrol pumps who were really the victims.
With a mallet?
With a mallet.
It's pretty extreme.
It reminded me of that scene in The Jerk where Steve Martin is there trying to protect the cans of oil. Oh. Why do they hate these cans of oil?
I love that he's a John Lennon lookalike.
That's the thing.
That's 70 years.
Because that's the thing that the Daily Mail talked about, his background and the fact that he was a John Lennon lookalike, which, as a stand-up, that's the thing you want, is to be able to go and say, I know what you're thinking, it's John Lennon here attacking these petrol pumps. But it's just, there's a lot of profiles of the protesters in here. One, Stephanie Golder, 34, in case you're interested. Charity worker from Essex, said that she was sick and tired of being treated like a criminal, as she kind of did a criminal act, allegedly. This is not the way to win people's confidence.
No, it's not. I mean again and again, what is it about the environmental protesters? Why do they keep annoying people? Because, peaceful protest is so important, and a lot of people would support their cause if they stopped smashing everything up and stopping people go to hospital, right?
But it's 90% ego, isn't it? It's about wanting themselves to be at the heart of something. That's all they can think to do. So.
Well, who was the group it was an environmental group smashing up the windows of that bank with hammers that said the word love and peace on the hammers? I mean, this is absurd. On the energy crisis, there's another story today, Andrew, an encouraging new source of fuel for to keep the lights on over winter. Yes, these are the... again, this is another example of the government sort of changing direction as a response to problems. So, obviously, we've got these fears of a Europe-wide gas shortage as a result of the war in Ukraine. And the government had planned and had pledged that coal power would be phased out by October 2024. Mm-hmm. And there were all of these various power stations that were in line to shut. But now the government's saying, actually, we're going to provide millions of pounds of subsidies in order to keep you open because we're going to have a shortage. And actually, this is what we're going to have to do. But the government is saying that this is a kind of stopgap solution. They're not revising their pledge to wean us off coal power by October 2024.
It's a kick in the teeth for the Great Reset theory, at any rate, isn't it? Because there's a lot of people who think that the war in Ukraine and indeed the pandemic and everything else was sort of basically created. They were warming us up for the for the green energy revolution.
Yeah.
It turns out that after 3 months of rising gas prices, they're willing to sort of burn cow dung and witches in order to keep them.
I think this is great news. I'm looking forward to seeing more chimney sweeps.
Yeah.
The London fog coming back.
Part of the British character,
it's great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Put a bit of texture in the sky. This next story, Eric, from the Telegraph. My main objection, as you know, is that they didn't go with the Jerry Rafferty soundtrack,
Yes.
Night Owl. But what's the story?
We had a good discussion about the soundtrack of this particular advert. In the Telegraph, Samsung have been accused of being tone deaf over an advert that has a lone woman running down the street at night, and she's wearing
with her earbuds,
with her earbuds in,
whatever,
with her,
not earbuds,
I think, with a
Samsung, so
smart watch and her Samsung phone. So critics are saying that the 1 minute advert, it doesn't reflect the true dangers of women being out at night.
True dangers of women. That's a thing that needs to be reflected in
true
more
dangers
adverts.
of women.
That's what the
Not two women, but all women.
have said. The true danger. But, I mean, it isn't a very realistic advert. For one thing, the woman is jogging in a city and she smiles at someone else, and they smile back at her.
She actually
So
gets a high five from a guy on a scaffold.
It's not based on reality.
No. But they weren't thinking about those things, were they, when they made this advert?
No, I mean, I do think it's a little bit of kind of victim blaming to say, well, we can't show a woman doing something that women should be able to do.
Exactly.
And so do we reflect that in an advert, or do we try and say, well, women can't probably do that and feel safe, and that's a problem.
I don't know if they can do it and feel safe. That's obviously, you're talking about a state of mind there. Whether they statistically are safe is an interesting question. The city she's in, it's hard to say, it looks as if it's Belgium to me. There's sort of like quite continental architecture. But I wonder if you do go running, if you are fit and healthy, as she clearly is, and you go running. I think the statistics, as you know, I'm sure you do know, that more men are attacked at night, actually, than women. I mean, there's a perception and how safe you feel, and then there's the stats.
Yeah.
I suspect a fit young woman running in high-end jogging gear through a virtually deserted street probably pretty safe, actually.
I would have thought, but also it is just an advert.
Yeah.
I can think it does feel like an overreaction.
If she suddenly sprouted wings and flew, that would be probably fine. But she's just pitched it to the uncanny valley.
I don't think the criticism that they are being flippant about the dangers to female safety is fair.
No.
Because quite obviously they weren't.
Yeah.
That's not. It's an advert.
And then finally, the Metro next, and what I'm calling the bovine emission lowering cow harness, or belch.
Yeah, so this is Prince Charles has met with a group of scientists or people, cow experts, who have created what they're calling in this headline in the Metro a gimp mask for cows. I've seen a photo. It doesn't look like a gimp mask. So just what you're imagining, the Pulp Fiction mask. Yeah. That's not what's going on here.
It's not got a zip and a rubbery feel.
No, it's not. It's not a fetishy thing. But it's a thing that actually deals with the methane that emerges when a cow belches, and somehow, I don't understand the science, somehow dissipates it. And Prince Charles is very impressed by this.
The Australians have underpants that work on this basis.
Is that right?
They get advertised in service station toilets. I can't remember the brand's name, but they claim that they carbon capture.
But apparently, the methane from cows is a major contributory factor to global warming. And so they're talking about... But what's interesting about this is when Charles visits these experts, they claim that the face device doesn't bother the cows at all.
Wonderful.
How do they know?
Amazing. Well, that is all we have time for. Thank you very much, my guests. I've been Simon Evans. I've been joined by Andrew Dolan and Eric McElroy. And tomorrow night, I think you're with Mark Dolan, I would imagine. Thank you very much.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling.
Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News. Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
To be precise. It's a wonderful historic place, but it's also politically a very important place. You know, we hear about the Red Wall all the time. The Red Wall in the north will decide who wins or loses the next general election. Well, maybe that's because right now, Kent, with 17 constituencies, has just one Labour MP. That's Rosie Duffield, Canterbury. And that's got more to do, I think, with a lot of students being in Canterbury and voting there. I hope they don't also vote where they come from back at home. But it's only a few years ago when half of the seats in Kent were Labour, and indeed all three of the parliamentary constituencies here in Medway were Labour. It's just in the last decade they've been held by the Conservatives. So here, the issues around do we trust the Conservatives, do we still believe in the Conservatives, are going to be